Heat shimmered in thick, liquid waves off the blacktop of State Route 164 as a quiet Tuesday afternoon in coastal Virginia fractured into something far darker. Commander Malik Reed, a decorated black naval officer with more combat deployments behind him than most men accumulate in a lifetime, found himself pressed against the side of a patrol car, steel cuffs digging into his wrists, while a young officer, high on the rush of unchecked power, decided the color of a man's skin and the quality of his car were reason enough to invent a crime. What Officer Travis Harlan did not know, could not possibly have known, was that the man he had just humiliated was the commanding officer of one of the most lethal maritime special operations units in the United States inventory. And that unit was already 4 minutes out. At 46, Malik Reed carried the quiet, immovable calm that only comes from years spent in the world's ugliest corners. His hair was cropped close, silver threading the temples in a way that looked more like earned distinction than age. Even relaxed behind the wheel of his meticulously restored 1969 Pontiac GTO, midnight blue, chrome catching every ray of sun, his posture remained parade ground straight. 24 years in the Navy will do that to a man. He had directed counterterrorism operations off the Horn of Africa, led teams through firefights that never made the news, and carried the private weight of every young American he had ever sent into the dark. Today, though, he was simply a man on 48 hours of hard-earned shore leave. He wore a plain black polo that stretched across broad shoulders, dark jeans, and aviator sunglasses. He was headed to a private back room at a steakhouse outside the small suburban town of Cedar Ridge to meet the operators he had personally selected and trained. Men who would walk through fire for him without asking why. Cedar Ridge was the kind of place that bragged about its manicured lawns, neighborhood watch signs, and a police department that had more budget than actual crime. It was also the kind of place where a black man driving a classic muscle car valued at roughly $85,000 drew long, suspicious looks. Officer Travis Harlan was giving one of those looks right now. Harlan was 28, still new enough to the Cedar Ridge Police Department that the badge felt like a crown. He sat in his Dodge Charger behind a faded billboard, nursing lukewarm coffee and a permanent chip on his shoulder. When the deep rumble of the GTO rolled past at exactly the posted 40 miles an hour, something ugly lit up behind his eyes. He saw the flawless paint. He saw the custom wheels, and he saw the dark-skinned driver behind the wheel. The thrill of the hunt hit him like a chemical high. He threw the Charger into gear, tires chirping as he pulled out and closed the gap. Malik noticed the cruiser in his rear view almost immediately. Situational awareness was not a switch he could turn off. It lived in his bones. He checked the speedometer, 40, checked the mirrors, clear. Registration and insurance sat neatly in the glove box. He kept both hands loose on the leather-wrapped wheel and continued driving with the same precision he once used to pilot rigid hull boats through mined waters at night. For nearly 2 miles, Harlan rode the bumper, hunting for any excuse. A tire touching the yellow line, a late signal, anything. Malik gave him nothing. Frustrated, the young officer decided he no longer needed a legitimate reason. He had a badge. That was enough. The light bar exploded to life. Malik exhaled once, a soft, weary sound, and guided the heavy GTO onto the wide gravel shoulder with deliberate care. He shifted into park, killed the engine, and rolled the window down. Both hands returned to the wheel at 10 and 2, fingers spread and clearly visible. In America, a black man during a traffic stop does not get the luxury of casual movement. Harlan took his time walking up, hand resting on the butt of his service weapon, chest puffed out. He leaned in without offering a greeting, eyes scanning the interior like he expected drugs to fall out of the vents. "License, registration, and insurance," he said, voice thick with unearned arrogance. "Certainly, officer." Malik's baritone was calm, measured, free of the fear Harlan was used to provoking. "My license is in my right rear pocket. Registration and insurance are in the glove box. I'm going to reach for the wallet first. Is that acceptable?" The precision seemed to irritate Harlan more than resistance would have. "Just get the ID." Malik moved slowly. He produced his Virginia driver's license, and behind it, his active duty Department of Defense identification card. He handed both over, along with the vehicle documents. Harlan squinted at the military ID, then at Malik, then back at the pristine GTO. A short, harsh laugh escaped him. "Commander, huh? In the Navy, driving an $85,000 classic around Cedar Ridge on a Tuesday. Sure, I am currently on shore leave," Malik answered. "Was there a lawful reason for the stop?" "You drifted over the yellow line back by the mile marker," Harlan lied smoothly. It was the classic fishing expedition excuse, impossible to disprove in the moment. "And I don't know where you got this fake ID, but you're going to need to do better." Malik's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That identification is federally issued. Run the barcode. It will verify my rank and status." Harlan stepped back, posture hardening. "Step out of the car, now!" The command hung in the humid Virginia air. Traffic whispered past on the highway. Malik stayed perfectly still. He knew the law. He also knew that debating constitutional fine points with an armed, agitated officer on a lonely shoulder was a losing tactic. "Officer," he said, voice dropping into the register he reserved for briefing rooms under fire, "I have provided valid identification, registration, and insurance. I have committed no traffic violation and given you no reasonable suspicion of a crime. I respectfully decline to exit the vehicle." Harlan's face flushed deep red. Compliance was supposed to be immediate. This calm, articulate refusal felt like a personal insult. He unsnapped the retention strap on his holster. The sound was sharp in the quiet afternoon. "This isn't a request. Step out or I will remove you." Malik assessed the threat with clinical speed. The officer's breathing was shallow, eyes wide, adrenaline dump. One wrong move, and this could end with a bullet. Surviving 2 decades of combat, only to die on a suburban roadside at the hands of a panicked rookie, was not how his story would finish. "I am stepping out," Malik announced clearly, hands visible every inch of the way. "I am unarmed and complying under protest." He opened the heavy door and stood to his full 6'2" height. He did not try to intimidate. His size and posture did that for him. Harlan took an involuntary half-step back. "Turn around, hands on the roof." Malik complied. Harlan kicked his ankles farther apart, harder than necessary, then conducted a rough, aggressive pat-down that found only a phone and keys. "What kind of scam are you running?" he hissed near Malik's ear. "Guy like you, car like this, flashing a fake badge, moving product through my town?" "You are making a profound mistake, officer," Malik said softly. The absence of anger made the words more dangerous. Harlan snapped. He yanked the steel cuffs from his belt. "Hands behind your back. You're being detained." "On what charge?" "Failure to obey. Resisting. Take your pick." The first cuff bit deep into Malik's right wrist. Muscle memory screamed at him to neutralize the threat. 3 seconds. Radius fracture. Officer unconscious on the gravel. He forced every muscle to stay lax. The second cuff locked even tighter, cutting circulation. Harlan stepped back, breathing hard, ego soothed by the sight of the large black man bound and neutralized. "Not so commanding now, are you?" Malik had already read the nameplate. "Officer Harlan, remember this exact moment. Remember the choice you just made." Harlan shoved him toward the cruiser and forced him into the cramped, hard plastic rear seat. The door slammed. The engine was off. The air conditioning was dead. Virginia summer heat turned the interior into an oven within minutes. Through the wire mesh, Malik watched Harlan return to the GTO and begin an illegal search. Console open, floor mats ripped up, every inch of the pristine interior ransacked for the contraband his prejudice insisted must be there. Malik's hands were bound, but his fingers still worked. On his left wrist, just above the cuff, sat a high-grade tactical smartwatch synced to the encrypted phone still sitting in the GTO's cup holder. He contorted just enough to press the side button in the precise sequence. A tiny vibration confirmed the secure channel was live. He spoke in a quiet, crystal-clear murmur that carried easily inside the sealed cabin. "Code Alpha. Actual is detained. Requesting immediate extraction. State Route 164. Northbound shoulder. Approximately 1.5 miles south of the Cedar Ridge Municipal Line. Go hot." 4 miles away, in the private soundproofed back room of a high-end steakhouse, Chief Petty Officer Boone Maddox was already restless. Boone was a mountain of a man. Thick beard, heavy tribal ink winding down both forearms, eyes that had seen the worst humanity could offer. He sat at the head of a long mahogany table with 6 other operators, all in civilian clothes that somehow still looked like uniforms. They were waiting for their commander. On the table in front of Boone sat a ruggedized, encrypted communication device rarely used stateside. Complacency kills. Malik had drilled that into them until it was reflex. The device pulsed an angry red. Conversation died instantly. A burst of static. Then the voice every man in the room would follow into hell. "Code Alpha. Actual is detained. Requesting immediate extraction. State Route 164. Northbound shoulder, 1.5 miles south of the Cedar Ridge Municipal Line. Go hot." Code Alpha meant the commanding officer was under duress. Actual was Reed. Go hot meant the rules of engagement were active. Boone stood so fast the heavy chair scraped the floorboards. "Gear up. No questions. No hesitation." Within 15 seconds, the team flowed out the back door toward 3 unmarked, heavily armored black Chevrolet Tahoes waiting in the alley. Reinforced bumpers, run-flat tires, trunks carrying equipment that was never supposed to appear on domestic soil. When a SEAL commander issues a code Alpha, certain regulations become polite suggestions. Boone took the lead vehicle. Petty Officer First Class Cole Brennan rode shotgun, already tracking the signal on a mounted tactical laptop. "Got him. Stationary. Looks like a roadside stop." "Someone put hands on the old man," Boone growled, knuckles white on the wheel. The 3 Tahoes tore out of the alley in tight convoy formation. No lights, no sirens. Just a heavy mechanical shadow cutting through suburban traffic at 80 miles an hour. Back on Route 164, Harlan had found nothing. He slammed the GTO's passenger door and stalked back to the cruiser, sweat darkening his uniform. He fired up the engine for the air conditioning and sneered at Malik through the rearview mirror. "Nothing in the car, huh? We'll see how smug you look after the dogs tear it apart at the station." Malik's dark eyes locked onto the reflection. "Officer Harlan, look in your side mirror." Something in the tone made Harlan obey. Down the long, straight stretch of highway, cutting through the heat haze at terrifying speed, 3 massive blacked-out SUVs were closing in staggered tactical wedge. Before Harlan could process it, the lead Tahoe executed a controlled slide and stopped diagonally across the nose of the cruiser. The second locked up parallel to the driver's door, inches away. The third sealed the rear. In under 3 seconds, the lone patrol car was completely boxed inside a fortress of armored steel. Harlan's hand dropped to his weapon. His heart slammed against his ribs. The doors of the Tahoes opened as one. 7 men stepped out, massive, expressionless civilian clothes over tactical holsters and dark vests. Boone Maddox walked toward the cruiser with the unstoppable momentum of a freight train. Harlan pressed himself back against the seat in pure panic and fumbled for the radio. "Dispatch, Unit 4, I have an emergency. I'm surrounded by—" He had no name for what he was seeing. Boone reached the driver's window and simply stared down through the glass. In the back seat, Commander Malik Reed finally allowed himself the smallest of smiles. "I told you," he whispered to the empty air. "You made a profound mistake." The dispatcher's voice crackled, tinny and distant. Harlan could not answer. His entire world had narrowed to the giant standing outside his window. Boone Maddox did not posture. He stood balanced, arms loose, the subtle outline of a suppressed Sig Sauer visible under his shirt, and an L3 Harris encrypted radio clipped to his belt. Behind him, the rest of the team had already established a quiet 360-degree perimeter. They did not shout. They did not draw. Their stillness was more intimidating than any raised weapon. Boone tapped the glass once with a tungsten wedding band. "Roll it down." Harlan lowered the window 2 inches. Just enough to speak, not enough for the giant to reach inside. "Back away from my vehicle. You're interfering with a lawful investigation. Backup is on the way." Boone leaned closer. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate the door itself. "Chief Petty Officer Boone Maddox, United States Navy. In the back of this vehicle, you are currently illegally detaining Commander Malik Reed, the commanding officer of my unit. You have 10 seconds to unlock these doors, step out, and hand me the keys to those cuffs." "He's a suspect. He drifted over the line. He flashed a fake military ID." A dark amusement flickered in Boone's eyes. "A fake ID. Son, I don't know what kind of operation you're running out here in Cedar Ridge, but you just detained a Tier 1 asset on a public highway because you didn't like the look of him in a nice car. I'm going to count to 3. If these doors are not unlocked, I am going to shatter this window, drag you through the glass, and unlock them myself." Harlan's hand dropped to his sidearm. "You can't threaten a police officer. I'll shoot. I swear to God, I'll—" The atmosphere shifted from tense to lethal in a heartbeat. 6 operators adjusted posture by fractions of an inch, hands hovering over concealed holsters, feet settling into combat stances. They were no longer a perimeter. They were a firing squad waiting for the word. From the back seat, a calm, resonant voice cut through the panic. "Take your hand off that weapon, officer." Harlan's eyes flicked to the rear view. Malik was leaning forward, eyes burning with the same authority that had once directed operations in places that never appeared on maps. "If you draw that weapon," Malik said, each word precise and cold, "my men will neutralize you before it clears the holster. You will not survive this encounter. Take your hand off the gun, Travis." The use of his first name, spoken with the certainty of a man who had stared down far worse, finally broke him. The bravado evaporated. Slowly, hands shaking, Harlan raised both palms to chest level. "Unlock the doors." The electronic clunk sounded like a guillotine. Boone pulled the rear door open, helped Malik out, and took the keys. The cuffs fell away with a heavy clatter. Deep red welts already circled Malik's wrists where the metal had bitten too deep. Status, Chief? Perimeter secure. Local dispatch is screaming. Multiple units inbound. ETA under 2 minutes. Understood. Nobody draws. We do not escalate. We let them come to us. Sirens rose from a distant wail to an ear-splitting shriek. 3 Cedar Ridge Ford Explorers tore around the bend, light bars flashing, officers spilling out with weapons drawn, expecting a cartel ambush. What they found instead was a surreal, meticulously organized standoff that short-circuited every tactical instinct they possessed. Oak Creek, Cedar Ridge Police, drop your weapons and get on the ground. The SEALs did not move. They simply watched the shouting officers the way a man might watch an interesting insect. A commanding voice bellowed from the lead explorer. "Hold your fire! Holster your weapons now!" Captain Elias Voss stepped out. 57 years old, buzz cut, lined face, 2 tours with the 75th Ranger Regiment before he ever pinned on a police badge. He took one look at the blacked-out Tahoes, the quiet operators, and the black man in civilian clothes rubbing bruised wrists, and understood immediately that this was not a gang hit. He kept his hands clear of his belt and walked into the open ground between the 2 forces. Captain Elias Voss, Cedar Ridge PD. Who's in charge here? Malik stepped forward. I am. Commander Malik Reed, United States Navy. Voss's eyes flicked from the welts on Malik's wrists to the terrified face of Officer Harlan, still cowering in the boxed-in cruiser. The pieces locked together with sickening speed. Commander, walk me through exactly what happened. Malik delivered the report with the clinical precision of a formal debrief. 20 minutes earlier, northbound on Route 164 at the posted speed. Valid documents presented, including active duty military identification. Officer claimed a yellow line drift that never occurred, became openly hostile when challenged. Ordered the driver out under protest. Conducted an aggressive search, applied excessive force with the cuffs, and locked the commander in the rear of the cruiser without articulating reasonable suspicion or reading rights. Then performed a warrantless, non-consensual search of the vehicle under the stated belief that narcotics must be present. Voss's face had gone pale. He turned slowly. Harlan, get out of the car. The young officer stood on shaking knees. Captain, I thought the ID was fake. Look at the car he's driving. He didn't fit the profile. He didn't fit the profile, Voss repeated, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You detained an active duty special operations officer, cuffed him, and tore his car apart because he was driving a nice vehicle, and you didn't like the color of his skin. Boone Maddox stepped forward with a ruggedized tablet. We run continuous dashcam and telemetry on personal vehicles for security. 4K video of the entire drive. GPS data proving 0 lane deviation and 0 speed violation. He held the screen out. The footage was damning. Voss closed his eyes for a long second, pinching the bridge of his nose. The liability was catastrophic. Commander Reed, I cannot begin to express how completely unacceptable this is. It does not reflect the standards of this department. It reflects the standards of that officer, Malik answered flatly. And until a few moments ago, he was operating under the authority of your badge. Voss's jaw set. Sergeant, strip Officer Harlan of his weapon and badge. Place him in the back of my vehicle. He is suspended pending immediate internal affairs and civil rights investigation. Harlan opened his mouth to protest. The sergeant was already moving. The badge came off. The weapon came off. The young man who had swaggered 30 minutes earlier was shoved into the rear of his own captain's cruiser. Voss stepped closer to Malik. voice low enough that only the commander could hear. "I wore the scroll. I know what a code alpha means. If I hadn't gotten here when I did, my men are professionals," Malik said. "They follow rules of engagement, but they protect their own. I initiated the distress signal because I believed my life was in genuine danger from an armed individual acting outside the law. Will you be filing formal charges? I will notify my command at Little Creek. They will coordinate with the Department of Justice regarding civil rights violations. You will hear from federal attorneys by morning." Voss nodded once, already seeing the depositions and press conferences stretching ahead. "Understood. What can I do for you right now?" Malik looked past him to the GTO, doors still open, floor mats tossed carelessly onto the gravel. "Have your officers carefully restore my vehicle exactly as they found it. Then clear this highway. My team and I have a dinner reservation." 20 minutes later, the convoy pulled into the gated rear alley of the Cedar Ridge Chop House. The manager, who maintained a discreet arrangement with the unit, had the back door propped and the private room ready. The moment the soundproof door latched, the lethal tension bled out of the air. Weapons disappeared into lockboxes. Vests came off. The heavy oak table weighted with prime cuts and ice water. Boone poured a tall glass and slid it across to his commander. "You handled that with more grace than I would have. If it were up to me, that kid would be drinking through a straw for 6 months. And that," Malik answered dryly, "is exactly why you are not in command. Revenge is emotion. Emotion gets operators killed. We de-escalate, assess, and neutralize only when necessary." That officer neutralized himself the moment he decided his ego mattered more than his oath. A younger operator named Ryder Quinn muttered, "Watching him try to play tough guy with actual Tier 1 assets was almost funny." Malik leaned forward. The room went silent. "It wasn't funny, Ryder. It was a tragedy. That young man was given a badge, a gun, and the responsibility of protecting a community. He weaponized his prejudice instead. I walked away today because I have rank, training, and all of you. What happens tomorrow when a terrified civilian without a military ID gets pulled over by someone like Harlan and panics? That is why we did not draw today. We do not become the monsters we are sworn to fight." The silence that followed was heavy with respect. These men would follow Malik Reed into any dark place on earth, not only because he taught them how to fight, but because he never let them forget why. Boone finally slapped the table. "Enough philosophy. We have 72 hours before wheels up. Let's eat." 3 weeks later, the humid Virginia summer had given way to an unseasonably crisp, overcast morning. Inside courtroom 3A of the federal courthouse in Norfolk, the atmosphere was sterile and quiet. The opposite of the chaotic adrenaline that had ruled Route 164. Baylor, Travis Harlan, sat at the defense table in a cheap gray suit, stripped of uniform, badge, and swagger. He looked small, exhausted, and terrified. In the front row of the gallery, directly behind the prosecution table, sat Commander Malik Reed in full Navy service dress whites. The uniform was immaculate. Rows of ribbons told the story of a career spent in places most Americans never hear about. Silver Star, Bronze Star with Combat Fev, Purple Heart. Above them, the gold Special Warfare insignia, the Trident, caught the fluorescent light. He sat with perfect posture, the living embodiment of the honor Harlan had casually discarded. The Department of Justice had moved with unusual speed once Naval Special Warfare Command forwarded the dashcam footage, the telemetry, and Captain Voss's sworn deposition. Assistant United States Attorney Victoria Langford stood before the bench, voice clear and unyielding. Your Honor, the defendant, acting under color of law, willfully deprived Commander Reed of rights secured by the Constitution and laws of the United States. He initiated a stop based on racial profiling, applied excessive and punitive force, and conducted a warrantless search. Video and telemetric evidence prove the complete fabrication of probable cause. Harlan's public defender offered no real defense. The evidence was insurmountable. They were simply begging for a plea that might keep their client out of a federal penitentiary for the maximum term. Judge Clarence Holt, a stern white-haired jurist with a well-earned reputation for zero tolerance of police misconduct, looked down over his glasses. His voice carried quiet disgust. Mr. Harlan, in nearly 3 decades on this bench, I have rarely seen such a blatant, cowardly abuse of authority. You targeted a decorated military officer, a man who has spent 2 decades risking his life to defend the very freedoms you so casually trampled, simply because you felt entitled to do so. Harlan kept his eyes glued to the table. Because of your actions, the judge continued, the Cedar Ridge Police Department is now operating under a federal consent decree. The structural reforms ordered by this court include mandatory biannual de-escalation and use of force training for every officer, independent civilian oversight with subpoena power over all internal affairs investigations, strict protocols banning pretextual stops without digitally verifiable objective violations, and zero-tolerance termination policies for deactivation of body-worn cameras or falsification of reports. You have single-handedly cost your city millions and shattered public trust. He closed the file with a soft finality. I accept the guilty plea to the federal civil rights violation under Title 18, United States Code, Section 242. Travis Harlan, you are hereby permanently decertified as a law enforcement officer in all 50 states. You are sentenced to 30 months in federal custody to be followed by 3 years of supervised release. Bail is revoked. The marshals will take you into custody. A soft gasp rose from the back of the gallery. Harlan slumped forward as the handcuffs clicked shut, this time for a reason that actually existed. Malik Reed stood, adjusted his combination cover, and walked out without a smile or a backward glance. On the marble steps, he pulled his phone and opened a secure channel. Actual. Boone's rough voice answered at once. It's done, Chief. Target is neutralized. Federal custody. Copy. Justice served. You heading back to base? I'm taking the long way, Malik said, unlocking the GTO with a soft click of the fob. The midnight blue muscle car sat at the curb, freshly detailed, chrome gleaming under the overcast sky. He slid into the familiar leather, turned the key, and felt the big V8 come alive with its deep, aggressive rumble. As he merged into traffic and pointed the car toward the coast, a profound peace settled over him. He had faced unchecked arrogance and systemic abuse, not with violence, but with discipline, truth, and the unbreakable loyalty of the men who called him boss. He shifted into third, the heavy car surging forward, ready to return to the shadows, ready to lead, and still ready to protect the nation he continued to believe in.